Six Nations week number 2, folks. We get underway with Italy taking on Wales, which is a game which this Six Nations you feel like has a whole lot of importance about it. Warren Gatland really needs a win because you feel like this is their best chance to get of the Six Nations. Obviously still a lot of the competition to go, but Italy is the game that they'll be targeting to get at least one win. And for the Italians, can they handle the pressure of being the favourites? Because they do go into this one at home, coming off a better performance than what we saw from Wales last week. And just they're a higher world ranking. It's rank 10 against rank 11. They won last year's fixture. Italy are the favourites for this one. Can they handle the pressure where they are not the underdog? We've seen them falter under that pressure before. We'll go through the squads, some changes that both coaches have made, some predictions, recent history stats, and you guys can let us know your thoughts on how this one is going to go. Subscribe to the channel if you want more Six Nations content, because there will certainly be a whole heck of a lot more. The Italians have resisted the urge to make a lot of changes. We saw it when we looked at their depth in the depth squad, depth chart video last year, or the start of this year. Gonzalo Quesada kind of has a relatively small group of players. He used fewer players than any other coach in the 2024 season. And he's kept with the same lot, barring a change in the second row. It's still Fischetti, Nicotera, and Ferrari, and you feel like these guys acquitted themselves pretty well against the Scottish scrum. So they'll be looking to put a bit of pressure on the Welsh pack. But they've faced France last week, so this is a big downgrade weight-wise from the French pack. The Italians are certainly a lot lighter. Cannone, that's Niccolo Cannone, gets a start in the second row ahead of Dino Lam. These guys swap places. That is the only selection change of the round. And Ruzza continues alongside him. Ruzza is the one guy you need to shut down at line-out time if you are Wales. You know the majority of the ball is going to go to him. So if you can somehow stop that guy, who is really good in the air, from getting his hands on the ball, you will limit the Italian options at line-out time. Sebastian N, our man who I'm always resistant to say his surname just because it has been flagged as a slur in the past by YouTube's computer thingy. 26 tackles last week. He was massive, but did give away a couple of silly penalties. He was the most penalised player in the Italian squad last week, only with 2, but maybe 2 too many. Lamaro continue on as captain at 7, and then Lorenzo Cannone continues on at number 8. The pack generally will just like a bit more ball, but again, they are facing a lower rank side than they did last week, so one would think they will have a bit more. Page-Relo and Garbisi continue on at 9 and 10. Those guys kicked relatively evenly. You see some teams kick a lot more off 9, some teams kick a lot more off 10, and with Tommaso Allan there at fullback, you might think he was a potential another option for a bit of field kicking, but no, it was largely just Page-Relo and Garbisi. I think they kicked one kick away from each other. It was 10 and 9, I think, last week. So it's a pretty even split between those two guys. So it's a harder one to predict. And then Menoncello and Brex are in the midfield. Menoncello, despite the fact that he didn't get the try, Brex got the try. Menoncello was really busy around the park last week. Remember, he's the reigning Six Nations player of the tournament from last year. 10 carries last week was first equal for the Italians. 3 defenders beaten was first equal for the Italians, and 2 turnovers won was the most for the Italians. So he's another one that you certainly need to watch. Capuozzo is on one wing, Ioane is on the other, and as I mentioned, Tommaso Allan is still there at fullback. He kicked pretty well last week for the Italians. Not afraid to opt for threes to keep the scoreboard ticking over if the opportunity arises. Bench-wise, Lucchesi, Rizzoli, and Riccioni. Those are the 3 front row replacements. Rizzoli got his debut last week and did all right, which was pleasing for him. I can't remember how many minutes he got, but I think it was around about 20, a bit less than 20. Dino Lam, as I mentioned, drops to the bench. Zuliani and Ross Vincent are the 2 loose forward replacements, so it's just the 2 backs with Garbisi, that's Alessandro, the halfback, and Trula comes in this week as the kind of utility outside back replacement, so they'll be hoping to get a bit of extra value from that 6-2 split, the Italians. So essentially, barring Simone JC, it's the exact same 23 with the addition of Trula and Lam and Niccolo Cannone swapping jerseys. For the Welsh, they have made a few changes. Some of them are injury enforced. The injury to Owen Watkin means he's been replaced by Eddie James in the midfield. So you've kind of got a 12, a 12, and a 12 in that Welsh backline, because Ben Thomas has largely been playing 12. He's at 10. Then you got Eddie James, who's a 12, playing 12. And then you got Nick Tompkins, who usually plays 12, at 13. So it's the triple 12 threat for Wales. We will see how that pans out. As I said in the past, I've been a defender of Nick Tompkins' selection in the past. I do see him offering some quality at times, but I feel like in recent times for Wales, maybe that quality hasn't been there, but I'm not sure how much of that is him. Certainly wasn't his finest game last week, but 43-0. That wasn't anybody's finest game for Wales last week. I mean, barring bloody Jack Morgan, who still managed to stand out outstanding. Gareth Thomas, Evan Lloyd, and Henry Thomas, that is the same front row as last week. As I mentioned kind of earlier, they didn't get absolutely blown away at scrum time, which was at least one pleasing thing. Gareth Thomas conceded a couple of penalties, but Henry Thomas was pretty stable. Will Rowlands and Dafford Jenkins are there in the second row. Jenkins, man, 24 tackles last week, was the top man for Wales, and he was also their main line-out option with 4 wins, but they're not as reliant on one guy at line-out time as the Italians are. James Botham, Jack Morgan, and Talupa Faletau round out the back row. So Faletau fit this week. He was unavailable last week. He replaces Aaron Wainwright, who drops to the bench. So it's a return to Welsh colours for Faletau for the first time in a very long time. Hopefully he's fit, rearing to go, and able to get Wales over the advantage line. I mean, Jack Morgan, though, last week, 15 carries, very busy. 21 tackles, likewise very busy, barring Jenkins' effort. He was your top man. And then 81 metres, literally the top carrier for Wales in that game last week. So hopefully he can get a bit of help from his friends this week. 9-10 combo is still Thomas Williams and Ben Thomas, as I mentioned. Eddie James, as I mentioned. His big unit comes in at 12. Gats did kind of mention he's not just a big guy, but he's got some skills. So we'll see if he can put them on display. Nick Tompkins, as I mentioned, is at 13. Tom Rogers on the right wing. Be interesting to see if they kick him some ball to contest aerially, because they got a little bit of pay from that last week. On the left wing, it is still Josh Adams, and then Liam Williams continues on at fullback. So James and Faletau are your kind of 2 additions to the starting 15 who didn't feature last week. Elliot D, Nicky Smith, and Kieran Asarati, same front row replacements as last week. Freddie Thomas, Aaron Wainwright, the other 2 forward replacements, and Gats is sticking with 5-3 with Rodri Williams, Dan Edwards, and Blair Murray, the 3 back replacements. Some stats for you. Despite having less ball than Scotland, the Italians managed to do a decent amount with it. One of the key metrics we look at, and it's going to be key when we look at Wales in just a second, is the kind of metres per carry. It's generally a pretty good marker of how well a team is getting forward, or if their attack is a little bit kind of static. 4 is kind of the magic number, and that's where the Italians were last week. They were at 4 metres a carry, which is really solid. So despite the fact they had less ball than the Scots, what they were doing with it was still relatively effective, but they would like more ball. They had to make 200 plus tackles against the Scots just because they were defending for large periods. Now that's not attempted tackles, that's completed tackles. If you get the missed tackles in there as well, like the total tackle opportunities is closing in on 250, which is a massive, massive number for 80 minutes of rugby. It's hard to sustain that kind of effort across the entire game, although they did still finish strong. They had the majority of the ball for the last kind of 10 minutes as they chased a try against the Scots, but they may be a little bit concerned that the only try they got last week, and as I said, they're quite happy to opt for the 3s. They weren't always chasing the tries, but when they did need to chase the try, they couldn't quite get it. The only try they got last week was an intercept from Brex, rather than kind of a try that they were able to generate themselves. So they would like to put some phases into action and score a try on attack this week, one would imagine, or potentially just keep the scoreboard ticking over. For Wales, the second 20, if we're dividing the game into quarters of each half, so the latter period of each half was costly. Like, Wales started both halves all right. The majority of the points they conceded was from about 15 odd minutes on in each half, right? Then France tended to pile on some points. So it's maintaining their performance levels for the entire half, which is going to be important. And the main area of concern for me, as I mentioned, when we're looking at those metres per carry, like Wales were low last week. Like they had, if you just looked at the stats, basically, they had 400 meters against France. It's a great effort. But the amount of carries they took and passes they took to get those meters was kind of painfully slow. They were at just over 2 meters a carry, 2.6 meters a carry. If the magic number is 4, and you see some sides, getting over 5, to be at 2.6 is low, and kind of just highlights the lack of penetration they were able to get against that big defensive French, Sean Edwards coach defensive line. So, yeah, they need to get the attack going. It needs to show something sharper than it did last week. Now, recent history between the sides, they've got this weird habit of exchanging away wins. No one's been able to win at home since 2020 during the Autumn Nations Cup when Wales won at Llanelli. So 2021 was a away Welsh win in Rome. 2022 was an away Italian win at Cardiff, and then an away win at Rome, and then an away win at Cardiff. So the split's 3-2, with Wales getting 3 of the last 5. But the most recent one, as I said, is that Italian win over in Cardiff, which was 24-21. So the average score is 31-18, but it's that oldest game of the bunch, which was in 2020, where Wales managed to win at 38-18, which kind of boosts the average, and then the year after was 48-7. So the last 3 games have all been a fair bit closer, 22-21, 29-17, and 24-21. So, yeah, Italy's not really managed to beat Wales by more than a score when they have managed to get their victories, but they are at home. Maybe that makes them favourites for this one. As the bookies have got it, the bookies are saying Italy by 7. The Rugby Forecast algorithm actually agrees, not quite as emphatically, saying by 6. Italy, can they convert on the favourite status? It is on at Stadio Olimpico in Rome this Saturday. It's on at 3:15 local time, which is a horrendous kickoff time for those of us in NZ. 12-hour difference, so 3:15 in the morning. Englishman Matt Carley is the ref for this one, so fingers crossed he has a good game. If you want to see me and Tony talk about Wales in particular, Tony's not a big fan of Gats. Link to the podcast which we did the other day, 2 Cents Gets Distracted. It's on Spotify or also on YouTube for your listening or viewing pleasure. But yeah, you guys let us know your thoughts on how you think this one is going to go. And I will talk to you guys again soon. See you later.